I'm so happy to be able to talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, which is our immigrant and refugee working group. And we are working to support immigrants and refugees by action and changing the system and service. And we really aim to do that with all of our actions. So this first part that I'm going to present is just some background on immigration. I'm concentrating on data on Georgia, although I'll give a little bit of history and a few definitions. I just have to put the caveat out there that I am an anthropologist, and anthropologists watch people, ask them what they do, what their practices is, and what the meanings are. And that really informs everything that I'm doing today and in this presentation. And of course, our context as anthropologists is the intersectionality of race, class, and gender, which you will see. Yes, I have been undocumented, but I'm a white woman, and it's different than the unauthorized immigrants that we're talking about today. So one of my main points in this session is that I would submit that our immigration laws are labor control laws, and they don't control the number of immigrants, but their rights and condition. So if you have questions, put them in the chat with your contact information and your question. And if we have time at the end, we'll take them. And if we don't, we will get back to you. And at the very end of our presentation, we will then go on to post all the links for all the data. But I have to really thank Melinda, Manette, Tara, and Jean, who helped me, as well as everybody else in the whole group has helped me with all of this. So, what's an immigrant? Oops, go back. So, an immigrant is a person, this is a definition, who's moved across a border. It could be even a border within a state like China. And an immigrant could be a voluntary or involuntary immigrant, and that would include refugees. An authorized immigrant could be include a work permit, a visa, a refugee, or somebody with temporary protective status. And I'm going to get to that one in just a second. But the great majority of people that I'm talking about today are what we call unauthorized immigrants. Overall, just note that 46% of all immigrants in the United States, almost half, are U.S. citizens. And if we add authorized immigrants to that, we're well over half of all the immigrants in this country are authorized in some way or another. A refugee is a person who has left their home country and fears their return. Refugees can request asylum, which is a request for international protection. And refugees with temporary protective status are refugees who have been given by our government temporary permission to be in the country based on political or sometimes ecological conditions. Please note, a number of countries have had their temporary status reduced by this administration this year. Is everything coming through clearly over there? Okay.
Yes.
So, just a very brief and kind of boring topic of history. Laws in the United States, I'm classifying them into two groups. And remember, first, the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to everyone in the United States. That's an important base to start with. But up until 1990, federal laws mainly covered who can come in, and with, for example, limits on how many refugees, or letting people after the Vietnam War were over, or people with certain skills come in. Important in this one is IRCA, or the Simpson-Rodini law, through which 3 million people, mainly men, mainly Mexicans, were given permanent residence to the United States instead of keeping them from moving back and forth. This changed everything, because instead of migrating home every year and coming back to the U.S. to work, they stayed here. And as soon as they were residents, they brought their families, and their families and children became Americans. So here's Maria signing her U.S. citizenship papers after her father, who was a bracero, got residence, brought her up at about age 9, and she went on to get a PhD in public health and anthropology.
Mom, hey mom, I'm gonna go.
What is that? Okay, sorry. So just remember, the laws create rights, but they don't stop immigration. And so my next slide is going to be more about laws that took place after 1990, at which time laws significantly changed and began to punish and increase the penalties and punishment for immigration, including raising the cost that it would cost to cross the border, as well as deaths. And this was a huge change. NAFTA increased or made the flow of goods freer, but not the flow of people. The Border Patrol Strategic Plan significantly, and when we look at deaths, the number of deaths go up after 1994. In 1996, 287G, still a very important federal agreement that allows local officers, sheriffs, and police to be deputized, in effect, as immigration agents. Only a few counties in Georgia are doing that at this time. But in 2024, we see the Georgia state HB 1105. And HB 1105 is important because it has affected everything that goes on. Here's a picture of our very own DeKalb County Jail. And when we interviewed the sheriff's office over there, they replied to us that they did not make the law, they don't like it, but they must abide by it. And this is the condition in which we have found many of our officials in DeKalb County to be in. So now I'm done with the most boring stuff and I'm getting down to what's happening in Georgia. The largest group of immigrants in Georgia is from Mexico. Guatemala and India are also important. 5% of our immigrants are refugees, and these folks mainly come from other countries, mainly Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. So you can see from this map where are most of the immigrants in Georgia. It's interesting to see that it's the urban areas with a very few, some of the more agricultural areas are in the south. However, one member of our team just reported that they found or they met the first South Afrikaner white immigrant coming into Georgia. Many immigrants in Georgia are citizens, and in 2024, Georgia swore in 24,000 immigrants as citizens. So, of the immigrants in Georgia, almost half are U.S. citizens, just as in for the nation as a whole. And when we combine that with the authorized group of citizens, of immigrants, we're well over half. Unauthorized immigrants in Georgia, as of 2023, the data, are about a third of our immigrants. So here's a picture, and it's a really old picture and blurry, so it doesn't hurt anybody. These two young women under the arch of the Day of the Dead altar at the Atlanta History Center, I believe, or the High Museum, I believe. They're married and they have their own kids. They're born in the United States. Their mother on the right is still, 30 years later, I just saw her a few months ago, undocumented and afraid to go to the supermarket. So that's the condition we have of many families have dual statuses within their family, and this really affects how they live in their life. Overall, the number of unauthorized immigrants in the United States has fallen in recent years. And Mexican immigration in particular has been net zero for over 10 years. That is to say, the same number of Mexicans return to Mexico voluntarily until recently as immigrate. So Mexicans are also no longer the largest group of unauthorized immigrants in the United States. This is mainly due to a demographic shift in Mexico as well as the economy in Mexico. I guess I would say people don't migrate unless they have to. Um, just to attack some of our myths, um, unauthorized immigrants have a lower crime rate than authorized immigrants and U.S. citizens, both in the homicide rate as well as the incarceration rate. It's about between 20 and 30% less for each category. Now, remember HB 1105? The reason we have this very data on this slide is because HB 1105 also requires sheriffs and jails to report quarterly all the detentions that they have. And so this is exactly where this data comes from, 1105, and it serves to show us where we're coming from here. But immigrants continue to, in Georgia, make up a very important part of our labor force. The largest occupation group is construction, but if we combine all the STEM fields together, it makes another quarter as well, and that includes nurses, but in addition, we have students, yard workers, domestic workers, and many other workers. Estimates vary for how much taxes they pay. And now I'm picking the lower one here of $352 million in taxes paid by immigrants compared to the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, much higher estimate. And you're going to see why in a minute, because I'm going to get just a little snarky here. FAIR, an SPLC hate group, has published, one of their fear-mongering things saying that immigrant households and their U.S. citizen children cost the government, Georgia, $781 a year. So I pulled it out and found other data for how many immigrant households they are, and I come up with a total cost that immigrants cost us of $300 million. However, if I take even the lowest estimate of taxes paid by immigrants, we take $250 million in taxes and subtract $300 million in taxes. You do the math. Who comes out winning? So we see that immigrants earn the same as non-immigrants in most categories, but they don't have the same kind of rights or benefits. So I was at a National Science Foundation evaluation meeting in Alexandria, and this Latino worker dropped right in on the meeting. And I have done a lot of evaluations in public health interventions for worker safety. Latino worker safety is one of the highest death rates. Construction and work is one of the most dangerous occupations. And I would be giving them a picture of an icon, say, of a helmet or a ladder. And I would say, well, what does this icon tell you? And they, of course, understood it immediately. They said, well, we're supposed to wear a helmet, or we're supposed to tie down the ladder. And so I said, well, why don't you do that? And they say, because we are in a hurry to finish our job. We're under great time pressure. The most beautiful thing, the most concise expression of this was told to me by a worker in a focus group. He said, Tras de mí hay 100. What he's saying is, I could get fired, and behind me there's 100 guys lined up to take my job. He doesn't have any choice but to cut corners for worker safety. So generally speaking, employers may pay a hospital if you're in an accident, but they don't pay unemployment. They may take your Social Security out of your check, but they may not deposit it in Social Security. And as we all know, many of us employ informal workers. They don't have any benefits, and we don't pay those benefits either. So this is where they fit in our labor force, a very important and underpaid group of people. One of the other very important myths about immigrants is that they lower wages. And data that I've followed from 2002, 12, and 2024 indicate that even when you control for age and education level, unauthorized immigrants and U.S. or authorized immigrants may work in the same field, but the unauthorized ones work in a complementary fashion, and the authorized immigrants then earn a little bit more, just a little bit more. Overall, immigrants earn about the same. It's just they don't get the benefits as authorized workers. So ZipRecruiter reports that $15 an hour figure for construction in Georgia. In Atlanta, two different people that I interviewed this month told me that what they would pay, say, a guy from Home Depot that they pick up and ask him to go help, would be more than that. So many people in Georgia have been detained, and this picture is purposefully blurry to hide any identities. This man was arrested at a car wash. Georgia, in their race to the bottom, is fourth highest in number of detentions in the United States, with about 3,000 detentions as of September. And there have been many more at the national level. One of the reasons why Georgia's prior conviction rate for its detainees is that we have not yet seen sort of the massive street detentions going on in California, Illinois, and now North Carolina, soon to turn blue, where 70%, over 70% of detainees have no priors. And in Georgia, that's only about 40%. Detention centers are really horror stories, as Maria Hinojosa showed in a study she did many years ago called Lost in Detention. Detention centers are private companies, and they are paid by the federal government up to $165 a day per bed, and they're guaranteed that those beds will be full even if they're not full. So for example, at Stewart, they were paid for 1,000. Well, they had 1,600 beds, and they got paid for 1,600 beds, even though they only had 1,000 of them full. These private companies, Core Civic, in the case of our favorite homegrown detention center, 96% of their donations, political donations, go to Republicans. I could live on $165 a day. I probably do. So for years, for decades, grassroots immigrant organizations have been organizing to denounce where there are raids or roadblocks or whatever. They have networks that I know of all through Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina.